Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now, your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Welcome to this episode of the Physician Sense Podcast. I am your co-host, Tyler Olson. Love talking all sorts of money things with you in the physician community. And as always, I'm joined by my lovely and energized co-host, Chad Chubb. Good to have you, man. How you doing?
Good. Excited to get into it. Special guest, too. He's good.
Special guest. You got to dive right in. That's right. Yeah, our special guest today is Jenny Twomey. Jenny Twomey is the community communications lead at Earnest. They provide lending services, among other things, around student loans and other types of lending. And we're going to be talking about debt. And so, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
You know, debt is really, really annoying. Nobody likes to have debt. And so a really, really easy way for us to make ourselves feel better about debt is to not talk about it, our own debt, or to not talk about the problems that surround debt. But if we're going to be providing the right kind of financial education for you all listeners who are either in medical school, or you're in residency or fellowship, or you're out of training and you're practicing as a physician, boy, is debt a major piece of your financial picture. And so we're going to talk about that today and many other times, I'm sure, over the course of the next several months. So, I mean, we could go so many different directions on debt. There's credit cards, there's personal loans, there's federal student loans, there's private student loans, there's mortgages, auto loans, private practice buy-ins, forgivable loans, all sorts of stuff that is really, really annoying, but we have to learn how to deal with it responsibly. If we had to pick any type of loan to talk about first, where would you start, Chad?
Because federal student loans would take not only an entire series on its own. So let's do private student loans to get us started, and then we'll see where it goes. Take it from there.
All right.
That
sounds good.
If we have to test Jenny's expertise out of the gate, what's your best private student loan question to get us started?
Here's one for you. If the private student loan offerings are one a fixed rate and one a variable rate, how does a person begin to decide what is right for them?
That's a very personal decision, and you have to look at what your plans are, what type of loan payment or repayment plan you're going to be looking at as well. It's not a decision that you can make just looking at what the market is, because usually when you're looking at interest rates or variable rates and fixed rates, if the market is doing well, then most people would gravitate probably towards a variable rate, because rates can go up and down, and they're trending down. That would be most beneficial for you. But that's not the only way to look at that decision. There's so many other variables within your life that will impact you. Really personal decision, but looking at what your goals are while you're in school, what you can comfortably pay, and what your goals would be after you graduate.
It's definitely a lot of factors. It came up even earlier this morning. I was having a conversation with a physician who bought a home several years ago, doesn't live there now, rents it out. He was on a variable rate, and it was at 2.5% some years back, which was great. And now it's at 8.8%. And he's like, what do I do? And so I tend to, by default, always say no to variable rates, because I don't like any more lack of control than already exists in financial planning. There's so much that we can't do anything about. And I think that the appeal of a lower variable rate, like that difference between what they could be paying versus what the fixed rate is, it just isn't worth it to me. I would rather not have to think about it, or have to think about it on behalf of our clients or anybody else that happens to ask us questions. So that's my default. Is there any, Chad, what do you, is there any thing, like where you're like, oh yeah, let's go with a variable rate?
Yeah. Well, first I was going to say, Jenny, whenever we ask those hard questions and you have to give that answer, you could always steal the financial advisor response, which is always, it depends. No matter what the question is, it's always, it depends. So that's your easy default the rest of the way out if you need that. So we use it all the time. You're allowed to use it. To that question, I agree with you, Tyler. That's how we think through it as well. I will always kind of use the joke, like even a variable rate is fixed. So like if rates trend down, especially, it depends the type of loan, right? Student loans, very easy to refinance. No closing cost. You want to do it weekly? You can do it weekly. Car loans, all that stuff. Mortgage is the tough one, right? You can't just be like, hey, I'm going to go refinance, rack up 30 grand of closing costs and move on. So for us, even variable rates can become fixed. And I guess you could say it both ways, even fixed rates could become variable. And if rates start to trend down, fantastic. Easy to refinance, lock in the lower rate. How the way that you worded, Tyler, to keep it simple, I think for a lot of clients, and even ourselves included, we usually will trend towards fixed. I think if we went back a year or two ago, that was the first time that we probably get into mortgages, which is not where I want this to trend towards, but those ARMs, those adjustable rate mortgages, we really looked at those a lot more because we're like, hey, rates are high now, but it feels like they have to trend down. Where that one can get tough though, because no matter what we say or all the talking heads on CNBC say, like they can be wrong. They're actually wrong quite a bit. And why we're saying rates should come down, something crazy happens and then rates go up. So for us, we'll usually default to fixed if rates trend down. Again, depending on the debt, a lot of those are very easy to refinance.
Tyler, it's really interesting that you bring up lack of control, because that's something that we hear a lot from our clients and telling us that they just have a lack of control with their student loans. And I think that goes back to just the fact that they sign up for these loans at a time where they didn't really know anything about finances. They're not truly understanding what they're getting themselves into. And there's a lack of financial literacy that we know is so it's just such a big problem, not just for students, but obviously for students in general. We have a recent survey from Earnest that actually showed that 91% of students that we surveyed say they would find a financial literacy class more beneficial than many of the classes that they took. And we feel really passionate about making sure that people feel in control when they're going through the process, that they really understand what their options are, what they're signing up for, what the costs are. As you said, student loans don't have any closing costs, but should you really understand like what's that interest rate and what the payment is going to be for the life of the loan? Those are really, really important topics around debt and financial literacy that people just avoid because it's just too overwhelming. But yeah, that's why you guys being here and providing that information is so important.
That is unfortunately not surprising. There's so much freely dispersed debt options for like students. The threshold upon which to be able to qualify for like a mortgage which is a collateralized asset, like there is a piece of property involved. You're like, well, we're going to make you jump through a lot of hoops if you want to get this kind of debt. But hey, you want to borrow $400,000 to be able to get a piece of paper? Sure. Here, just sign right here. Yeah, how old are you? 21? Yeah, no, that's fine. It's very frustrating. I appreciate what you're saying about how so many people would like to be able to better understand debt. Let's talk about it. Like, what is it? And so one thing that we wanted to talk about first was like, what is debt and how it works? That being the case, debt is you take money from a lender and then you agree that you're going to pay it back according to a specific term. For the privilege of obtaining the money, you will have to pay back more money than what was given to you. It's interesting how money loans work, because the money itself is it's a thing of value. It's like if you buy a car, you get the car and then you have to pay for the car. But if you want to borrow money, you have to pay back the money with more money. So it can be confusing to many of us. But it's important to understand, like for those of you who are listening who are still in medical school or maybe even pre-meds, as you think about taking out your first student loan disbursement, and if it's a graduate loan, the interest or the money that you owe for taking that money starts to be counted right away as soon as you take those funds. And so, over the course of, say you borrow $50,000 for a given given semester, oh my goodness, the $50,000 that's borrowed, if it's at the 8% rate that some of the grad loans and grad plus loans are at right now, over the course of a year, that's $4,000 that you're paying on top of the $50,000 that you're going to have to pay back. So when one borrows money, it's really important to look at what those terms are. The interest rate is the amount of money that you are paying for the privilege of this money to use. And then the term is the amount of time that goes by before you have to make the payment back. But there's so many different types of terms, like especially with federal student loans, that it's so complicated that I'm going to pause there. But I just wanted to make sure we nail down the basic concept. You get money, you're going to have to pay it back, and then you're going to have to pay back extra because you were borrowing money that is of value. Does that make sense how I explained it? What do you think?
I think it makes sense. Again, something that we see in our industry so often. People come to maybe refinance their student loans and they don't really, and until that point, or maybe when they're faced with their first monthly payment, is that they really know how much money they're on the hook for. You go in through the process, you're taking money out semester per semester or year by year, and it's not until you're faced with, okay, I have to make this payment, that you're looking at it, you're looking at how much interest accumulated until that point, and you realize, like, wait, I only borrowed like this amount of money. Like, how did it turn into $500,000 in debt?
I think especially in the student loan world, that's the one where like we work with very smart physicians, some of the most intelligent people out there. And the amount of times that they join us and they're like, Chad, I only took out like 250, only 250,000. Like, how is it like 500,000? I'm like, well, there's this little thing called interest. And it was very expensive for that period of time, but it's amazing. You know, Tyler, you use age 21. I even go to like undergrad years. I'm like, well, they were giving me a lot of money at like 18 years old. And you know, it's just crazy, which you go through the whole history of student loans. It's wild kind of reading through all that. But yeah, it's shocking how many to this day, or like even when you're, again, I keep coming back to mortgages somehow, but when you start to do the numbers, you're like, well, the home costs this, but now it's actually double that when you include the interest over 30 years. It's still shocking. I mean, to very intelligent people, that when they actually see what that total interest number can be, which is why when we say, especially on mortgages, but you know, if something goes down 25 basis point or 0.25% or 50 basis points, 0.5%, especially on larger debt, student loans, mortgages are going to be top of mind. It can become a massive savings over that period of time. Even though it didn't move that much, it's on a big number. So it can become a very large number in terms of savings by getting those chances to refinance to a lower number.
I'm glad you brought that up, Chad, because that is why I wanted our second topic to be about like when to refinance, because there are decision points that a given physician will face with their debt. The first, of course, is when they took out the debt. And a lot of times we're talking about a decision that's already been made and set in stone, but it doesn't mean that they can never make any adjustments. Refinancing is one of those decision points. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of scenarios wherein refinancing may be appropriate and when it may not be appropriate, particularly surrounding federal student loans. So one example that I thought of where it would not be appropriate to refinance would be somebody who is in their second year of internal medicine residency. And let's say that they have, let's say they've got like $175,000 in federal student loans. I've had this scenario happen several times where they're going to get out of training. They're not going to do fellowship. They've decided, they're like, well, I'll just be a hospitalist. And the pay options for a job that would qualify them for PSLF versus a job that would not qualify them for PSLF makes it such that like maybe they'd make more money by just taking the non-PSLF qualifying job. And it's, I say this carefully, only $175,000 in student debt. It's still a ton of money, but relatively it's low. And so I've seen where someone is in the middle of IM residency and they're like, I'm just going to be a hospitalist. And so I should refinance because right now I'm paying like an average of like 7% interest on my loans. And I've seen that Earnest or some other company is offering something. They're like, I can get like 4.9, and that would save some money. And they're absolutely right that it would. But I'd say in that situation, it's really important to be careful until you know for sure that you're not going to pivot. And there's two scenarios in this particular situation, because IM is always like, there's always like several different ways that things could go. I've seen it where someone, their first job out of their 3-year residency, they decide to take a job as a hospitalist that is qualifying, and then they just have like they reignite this desire to go into cardiology, and they like apply for cardiology fellowship, and now all of a sudden, instead of just having 3 years of PSLF qualifying payments, they are now going to have 7. And so I like to keep the door open in those sort of situations, because once you refinance out of federal student loans, you cannot go back. Have you run into something like this before, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, you said it how we think about it too. If we have a client that even goes private practice and they're like, I love this group. They gave me floor seats to the Oklahoma Thunder. These are my people. I'm never leaving this place. And then like 6 months into, they're like, kind of hate the partners. This sucks. And now all of a sudden they're like, I think I'm going to go back to academic role. And you're like, oh, sugar, remember when you said you love them and they gave you the floor seats? Well, we can't undo what we did with your student loans. So that ship has sailed, and you're like, a couple 100,000, we'll use the 175 number. It's a big number. So going back to the IM case study, we are very picky on, like, even if the rate's a little bit lower, we'll usually say like, hey, we still like the flexibility that the federal loans offer. So it needs to be a very, very, very good case that you're like, once the ship leaves the port, we're never coming back. Because sometimes you get out there and you're like, we forgot somebody, we're going to go back. And unfortunately, student loan world, we can't fix that. So we're very slow to ever make that transition out of federal loans if there's like a very small percentage that PSLF is the reason to go for it. And luckily, there hasn't been a huge difference in rates, at least in the near term, where it was like super attractive. You're like, you say that. And the other thing with student loans is when you're comparing to PSLF, right, it's only a 10-year window. There's a big, a 3% rate versus an 8% rate in 10 years can become a large number. But if you're already halfway there, I think that also adds a little bit of flexibility. So if we come back to that interest conversation we used, like, that's also very important. And we'll usually come back to say, like, it's a $30,000 bad decision if you do this or that based on interest rates alone. But here's what it could be if you miss out on PSLF, or that, again, that ship turns around. So we try to always bring it back to that. But again, to your main case study there, Tyler, we're very slow to make that pivot, which I hope most people listening take that very slow. In terms of federal loans, if there's private loans they already had out there, that's where we're calling our friends over at Earnest. We're getting our rates, and we're like, this one is truly get the lowest rate, refinance. We're not worried about those private loans. The federal loans are just on their separate island.
We have conversations like that with clients all the time. And, we're not financial advisors. We are also not salespeople. We're trying to guide you through really just what is your unique situation. But yeah, people will ask us, like, what do we do with our federal loans? Can we combine federal and private student loans? When is the right time to do it? And we have clients also just look at them separately, like, because you have some loans that you took out 1 year and maybe that interest rate was 9%. And then the next year, the interest rate was 6%. So you don't have to make a decision on all of your loans at the same time. You can refinance some of those, or maybe you just decide that's not the right solution for you and you keep all of the federal ones federal, and then just combine your private student loans into one private refinance.
Yeah, that's a good process. I view the decision to refinance federal student loans really similarly to how I view buying a home right after training. They're not exactly the same, obviously, because you can move to a different city and keep the same loan. But in terms of being confident in your career decision, that compels you to think, yeah, I don't need PSLF. I'm good to go with just knocking this debt out myself. I'm glad to hear that you're also a slow mover on that, Chad and Jenny. What about a situation where it would be good to refinance? I mean, there's some really, like an easy situation that comes to mind is someone who's like graduating GI, gastroenterology, and they're going to go into a private practice. Yeah, I'm picking on IM again. But there's so many scenarios. This is a really common one that I've seen where they got student loans, they're going into GI, and it's not just about the fact that they're going into private practice. It's also that the income potential in that specialty tends to trend higher. That makes PSLF that much less appealing. So, like when I see those situations, I'm usually like, yeah, let's just nab the lowest rate that we can find.
Yeah. I mean, I'll use my cheat sheet that I gave to Jenny there. It depends, right? Yeah, because there's always still that concern of like some type of pivot. So if there's a really good savings, or using it like for whatever reason, dentists are always my easy example, because dentists are always like, oh, I'm doing private practice. There's not a lot of like public service roles for dentists. So dentists are like the easy ones where it's always, there's nothing there. Let's go refinance. But for whatever reason, medicine to me is always the one where I'm like, there could be a pivot. So I think, again, case by case, client by client, knowing all the facts, knowing where they stand. We still get clients to this day. I don't know about you, Tyler. Like, I don't believe in public service loan forgiveness. It's not as common as it was a few years ago, because now we're seeing that, hey, my friend got it, my colleague got it. Like the amount of people in their circle that got it makes them a lot more comfortable. But we'll still have one every now and then that says, I don't trust it. I don't want to do this. I don't feel right doing it. You'll get that one every now and then. So it's truly case by case. But there's certainly times where someone will come in and we're like, sure, couldn't happen. Or, you do the math on it and their loan balance is so low that trying to get them to PSLF is actually going to cost the same, if not more, than what it would have been to just say, hey, let's go get rid of them, pay them off quickly, and be done with it. So again, case by case, it depends.
Yeah, no, good call. We got to be intentional with these steps. I think another reason too is that if you're someone who's recently out of training and you're managing cash flow, a refinance it will likely put you on a suddenly higher payment, and there's no income-based plan, so, if all of a sudden you could be jumping from $375 a month to $2,000 a month or more, if you're not careful. So that goes back to our first topic, that being, you really need to know the term, the interest rate, and what the payment amount is going to be, and that you can service that debt in a healthy way, so that you're not finding yourself strapped for cash. There's so much my mind is on the new attendings, because there's so much on their minds, and they're on their own now. They're not under the supervision of anybody, and learning a new EHR and like learning a new city, maybe getting good communication with their colleagues and their underlings and their superiors. And it's just a lot. And so I think those are also good reasons to not do anything too quickly, because, it can wait.
There's some other reasons, like, we hear from clients too that they come to us to refinance. It could be just the servicer. They either unhappy, or they just want to change the servicer that they currently have. We hear, actually, I went through a series of interviews with some of our clients for testimonials for our social media. And we hear a lot of just like the lack of control of knowing where their payments are falling, because they have too many servicers and they don't know when the payments are happening, and again, understanding the terms. Cosigner release is another common reason why people might tend to look at refinancing. You have a cosigner, you took out all these loans because you were 17, 18, you didn't have any credit. You had to have somebody come and take out those loans with you, but now they're pressing you. They don't want to be liable for any of this debt. So you refinance the loan without that cosigner, remove that liability. When it comes to kind of like what you're doing and where you're looking to refinance, federal loans, private loans, so many companies kind of put you in these buckets of like, you have to have, this is your 5-year term. It's going to be this monthly payment, or 10-year term. It's going to be this monthly payment, this interest rate, 15, 20. So it's important to do your research and know like what are your options of what's the flexibility, because we actually have customers come to us and it's a little bit opposite of what you're saying, Tyler. So instead of they're refinancing because they want to aggressively pay, they're actually looking to take out a mortgage and their lenders telling them they have to free up some cash flow. They need to change the terms of the loan so that they have more freedom, more bandwidth. So they come to us, they refinance, they actually take a longer term and a lower monthly payment. But with Earnest, like one of the things that we really take pride on is we don't put you into buckets. So when you're going through the process, you're approved, you have a payment slider, and it's a tool that you kind of guide yourself through what's a monthly payment. And we try to make it educational as well. So you have your monthly payment is this is going to be tied to a 5-year term, or maybe it's 5 years and 6 months, 5 years and 8 months, 10 years and 2 months. Like it's very, very precise to what your needs are and what your budget is. And then with that, we show you that's the monthly payment. This is how long it's going to take you to pay it down to the month. And then also what's that interest payment at the end? Like, because you're just looking at, this is the monthly payment, I can do that. But when you're moving that slider one way or the other, then you see like, okay, my actual debt amount and what I'm going to end up paying for this is going to be, so much higher than if I like move it like maybe $10 more, and you can like really see what that impact is. And again, we don't want anybody to stretch their budget, like, because I know even $10 makes a huge difference when you're looking at your payments. But if you pay a little bit more, if you can pay a little bit more aggressively, you can save over time.
My heart skipped a beat when you said lower your payment and spread out your debt. That's just me personally, but that's the financial advisor side. As long as you don't try to pitch in a whole life policy there because you lowered the cash flow, we're okay, Jenny. We'll keep you around.
Okay, sounds good.
That does make sense though. And that's actually, a conversation we have quite a bit with clients on just getting things organized from a cash flow perspective. So that makes sense. My financial planner joke in there where we're like, no, don't want to spread out the debt. Don't want to make this any more expensive. But we do know, again, case by case, it depends.
It depends.
You do free up some cash flow if it does allow something else to work out, especially, if that's a home or something like that. So certainly a good point there.
A lot of ways that we should continue to discuss managing debt. Chad, like I'm even as we've been talking about this, Jenny, my brain is just like, ooh, subtopic of like all sorts of ways in which we can discuss. But any of you who are listening right now, I want you to know that we're not going to be talking for another 30 minutes about debt. We're going to be ending very soon. I just want you to know that we're going to be talking about other areas of debt management in the very near future. So please stay tuned for that, because in order for most physicians, who I think the last tally I saw was 78% of graduating medical students have substantial medical student or medical school tuition loans. It's a major piece that needs to be sorted out in order for you to be financially successful. So that's why it's going to continue to be a hallmark of our discussions here. But having understood the fundamentals of how debt works and a couple of scenarios with how and when refinancing may be appropriate, we wanted you to come on, Jenny, because we appreciate the type of service that Earnest provides. And so any of you listening, if you are looking to refinance because you've got, like, if you've got credit card debt, that is a slam dunk. You need to refinance if you have the ability and the credit score to be able to get to a lower rate. And Earnest can definitely assist with that. They're really, really helpful, I've noticed. So we appreciate the type of service that you provide.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And yes, people can come, they can check out their rate without impacting their credit. So that's something you could do on just earnest.com. It takes about 2 minutes. And once you do that, you have access to, and this is again something we're really proud of, we have our client happiness team. That's what we call our customer support team. They're real people, not bots, and they're ready to guide you to your plan. And we'll, again, we're not salespeople. They're going to be honest about which of your needs we can meet. And you're not alone. Like we have talked to so many people that are lost, that have so much education, that gone through it all, and you would think like, that they know what their finances are, but yeah, we hear from people all the time that they just don't know where to start. which is why both of you are in business. You're there to guide folks. And yeah, like, we heard from our survey recently that 92% of students would have done college differently if they had not, if just knowing the amount of it that they graduated with. And this one is shocking and sad. 16% of them said that they would not have gone to school at all, just based on the debt they graduated with. So get informed, make those decisions, having all the information as soon as possible so that you're not shocked by the time that first payment is due.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. I appreciate you coming on, sharing the insight. We also appreciate the partnership that we have with Earnest, and you guys also putting some trust in us out of the gate. So thank you. I'm sure we'll have more debt topics where we got to bring you on for more expertise in the near future. So we appreciate it.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
And that ends our episode today of Physician Sense. We will be talking about debt, but Chad, we've got other stuff to talk about. Like, we got to start delving into like asset protection. Ooh, I've been reading about that. Boy, we got some stuff that we got to dig into. So this has been really great to talk about this, and there is a lot of good things to come. So we appreciate all you listeners listening today and in the future. I'll see you sometime soon, Jenny, and I'm sure I'll see you even sooner, Chad.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Deals Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state registered investment advisor.